Today we're going to be making one of my favorite side dishes, little red potatoes with bacon and onion. We're going to start with 1.25 pounds of little red potatoes, and we're going to put them in salted water. Usually I put a tablespoon or so of kosher salt in my water because this isn't a whole lot of potatoes. And bring this up to a boil. Once they hit boil, we're going to cook them for about 15 minutes. Just check them to see if you can pierce them easily with a fork. So while we get that going, we're going to go prepare our bacon and onions. So for the bacon and onions, I'm starting with a preheated skillet so that our bacon gets that nice little sizzle when it drops in. So I'm going to go ahead and pop in our bacon. Now I've cut it into nice little chunks. This is about 3 slices of a thick cut bacon. If you are using a thin cut bacon, then you may want to use 4 or 5 strips of bacon. It's up to you. We're going to let this cook a little bit before we put the onions in because we want the onions to cook in the bacon grease. So we're going to get this going a little bit. I'm going to stir this up with a spatula. Now you can cook this if you want a finer chopped bacon. You can do that. I like larger chunks in these potatoes, so if you prefer something a little finer, you also have the option, if you would prefer, just to cook the slices and then pull them out, crumble them, and add the onions to the bacon grease in the skillet after you've pulled them out. So a couple of options depending on your personal preference. So we've gotten a little bit of color on here, and I'm going to go ahead and add our onions. I have half a cup of just sort of coarsely chopped onion. Lost a little piece, but that's all right. And again, if you want a finer onion, you can. I just like to be able to sort of see them with the potatoes, not be something practically invisible. Now, as we cook this, you don't want your bacon to get really hard and crispy. You want it to still be a little tender. So don't take it down to the shriveled burnt bit, because we're going to put this in the oven later. And you don't want to have hard chunks of bacon. You still want it somewhat soft, not all the way cooked like you would if you're an extra well done bacon kind of person. So we're going to look to keep some of the pink. And we want our onions to get a little translucent. We really want them to get flavored by our bacon. You can see them getting a little lighter now. And just keep stirring it. You don't want any particular bit to get very dark or very brown. So don't leave this unattended. Just keep it moving. We are getting close. Now when we take these out of the pan, we are not going to drain off the grease. There's not a whole lot of grease in here right now. I'll use a slotted spoon to put this into a bowl, but I'm not going to blot this with paper towels or anything like that. I'm not going to press the grease out because you do want a little bit of that flavor in there. Now I'm not going to go and scrape down every bit of grease either. We don't need all of it, we just need some of it. And you can see there's some chunks that are a little bigger. If you want, you can kind of hit them with your spatula a bit, break them up. Up to you. You know, I know folks that like large chunks of bacon. So you can leave them big, you can take them small. Works either way. Okay. So about another minute or so, we'll have our bacon and onions ready to go. And just keep stirring. We don't want this to burn. I'm cooking this on a medium heat, so I don't want this to go super fast. I've tried doing it on higher heats, and sometimes you just burn your bacon and have to start over. I mean, I'm not saying you don't eat your slightly burned bacon, but you have to start over for this dish if it's gone rock hard. And I've still got my potatoes bubbling along beside me here, so when we're done with this, we'll go check on our potatoes. You know, our onions are getting a little golden at the edges, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this off with a slotted spoon, so that way we keep some of the bacon grease, but not all of it. And just put it in a bowl. Slightly messy process sometimes. Okay. So we have our bowl of bacon and onions. We're going to go check on our potatoes. Okay, we have our potatoes bubbling away. They've been boiling for about 15 minutes. So I stuck a fork in. There's a little bit of resistance, but for the most part, they are done. So, yeah, it's going in easily. So what I'm going to do is pull these off the stove, drain them, and run a little bit of cold water over them to bring the temperature down for me. Okay, we're back with our slightly cooled potatoes. I usually just run a little bit of cool water over them so I can handle them better. I've sprayed my casserole dish with some nonstick spray, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut these potatoes in half really quickly. Now you also have the option of leaving them whole, but I like the butter and the bacon and everything to get all nicely coated in here. So I give these a quick cut up here. And if they break up a little bit, that's okay. Whoops, almost lost one. It doesn't need to be exact, it doesn't need to be precise. This is just a rough cut of these potatoes. I'm actually going to put in a couple smaller ones, just whole, so you can kind of see what they look like at the end. Some of these potatoes are about double the size of others, so it's nice to break them up a little bit. Put a couple little ones in. And this is just a nice potato dish to spice things up. And I'm about filled this little casserole dish, so I'm glad I'm almost done with my potatoes. If you have a couple sitting up on top like this, it's okay. We're not going to worry about it. Okay. So what we're going to add next is our bacon and onions. Get that all in there. There's a little bit of grease at the bottom of the bowl. We don't need quite all of that, so we'll put that away. give that a little bit of a stir. And then I'm going to add a stick of melted butter, because you can never have too much butter, right? I'm just using unsalted butter for this because the bacon and everything has enough salt in it, plus I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning. So I'm going to give this a stir. Okay. And then we're going to add one final ingredient, a little bit of specialness. This is 2 tablespoons of barbecue rub seasoning. I'm using a Kansas City style barbecue rub. Now, if you don't want to use that, or your pantry is empty and you don't want to do that, that's okay. If you do a mixture of salt, pepper, and a little bit of garlic powder to your taste preferences. I realize not everybody likes garlic or doesn't like everything really salty. I totally understand if that's your preference, but this will give this a little bit of color. I can use a little more of the seasoning salt when it comes to using a Kansas City style rub, because it's not all salt. There's some sugar in there too to go with the spices, and the salt and pepper in it. So if you're using a different style of rub, like a Montreal or some of the other steak seasonings that are out there, you may want to cut it down to 1.5 tablespoons, or even just a tablespoon, depending on your personal preference. Now we're going to take this, put this in the oven for 15 minutes on 350, and then we'll come back, give it a stir at that point, and pop it in again. So see you in 15 minutes. So our potatoes have been in the oven for 15 minutes. I've popped them out just so we can do a quick stir, because again, we want to get the bacon and the onions and the butter all distributed, all the seasoning salt distributed. So we don't want it all to just sit at the bottom for half an hour. So we're just giving this a quick stir. Try not to chop up your potatoes as you do it. Just be gentle. I just use a spatula. Kind of turn them over and over a little bit so that you're basically basting them in the butter and all the goodness. So now I'm going to pop it back in the oven for another 15 minutes and let it finish up. And here we are with our lovely finished potatoes with bacon and onions. I hope you enjoy.